Okay, I call the meeting to order. At this time, we'll stand for the invocation by Mr. Garber, and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's pray. Father, we are grateful for and continue to seek your direction and provision. We stand firm on your promise for this city, and we pray that you provide its leaders with wisdom and steadfast commitment to your vision as we steward this great city's resources and relationships in the next season. In Jesus' name, amen.
Raise the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honoring the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, tonight we have a couple proclamations to read. First one is about Law Enforcement Appreciation Month. Whereas the safety and well-being of all residents is the first priority and the highest calling of the city of Corinth, it is important that all residents know and understand the duties and responsibilities of their law enforcement officers and agencies. And whereas we recognize the sacrifice made by our law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line every day to protect our families and communities, uphold the values we hold dear, and enforce the rules of law. And whereas the mission of law enforcement requires the ability to act courageously and quickly, to make the right call in the face of imminent danger, to run toward danger instead of away, and to act with empathy and compassion as one serves others in their time of greatest need. And whereas the dedicated men and women of the City of Corinth Police Department rise daily to the trials at hand, selfishly serving residents during one of the most challenging times in world history, and whereas the City of Corinth and its residents are honored to stand by our dedicated law enforcement professionals, our everyday heroes, and lend our wholehearted support to them as they continue to give of themselves for the benefit of all. Now, therefore, I, Bill Heidemann, do hereby proclaim January as Law Enforcement Appreciation Month, and I encourage all residents to honor and show appreciation for law enforcement personnel and the role they play in the health and safety of our homes and communities in Corinth. Signed this 20th day of January, 2022. Congratulations, Chief. Please come up here and receive your award and get your picture on the front page.
We're going to stand up behind you so we can be in the picture. Okay. So, Catherine, come on down.
You need more room? Are you trying to say I'm too big? No. I would never say that. Sorry, Kelly.
That's okay. Y'all can Photoshop me in.
Smile.
I'm sure this won't go viral if you're the only one that doesn't support the police.
You got it?
Thank you, Chief.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Got a few words for us?
The only thing I would say, Mayor, is this is just the proclamation is evidence of the support that we get from the mayor, the council, the city manager, and from the people in Corinth. I've never seen anything like it in my 52 years of law enforcement. So thank you for your support very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have another proclamation here tonight for the 2021 Richard R. Lilly, Texas Chapter of the American Planning Association's Excellence Award. For the third consecutive year, the City of Corinth has received the Richard R. Lilly Planning Excellence Award for the Texas Chapter of the American Planning Association. The award recognizes planning excellence in municipalities throughout the state. Evaluation criteria include the level of training of planning commissioners and the professional staff, professional qualifications of the planning staff, breadth and currency of the master plan components, and completion of other planning-related projects. The goals of the program include increasing community awareness of the importance of planning, recognizing planning departments which meet certain professional requirements, recognizing planning efforts that have achieved community support, encouraging the funding of professional training for planning commissioner staff, and aiding economic development and community image. The City of Corinth first earned this award in 2019. This time I'll present this to Clint. Okay, very good.
Maybe we should all get our pictures with her too, so she doesn't come on with that.
This is the city where. Come on, planners. Come on, planning. Come on up here. You're the special guest here tonight.
Thank
You
you.
want to say a few words?
Oh,
Mike.
thank you. Say something good.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm so excited. I wish Miguel and John could be here, and it's an exciting time in Corinth with economic development lease also. So thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments? Okay. Consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion. Should the mayor or a council member desire discussion of any item, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. I'd entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Cast your vote.
I vote yes.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Okay,
Is it? There it goes. Very good. Okay, it's unanimous. Business agenda. Consider an act on a contract with NG Painting for the Woods Ground Storage Tank Rehab Capital Improvement Project, CIP WA 22-01 and 22-02 projects in an amount not to exceed $1,209,750 and authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary documents. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'd like to have our Public Works Director, Glenn Barker, to lay out this item for you. I might make a mention, based on some of our earlier discussions on what goes on consent and what doesn't, because it's a seven-figure item, I thought we would put it on regular.
It's a good idea.
So I'll give you a quick background. 2009 and 2004, these tanks were both rehabbed. The coating lasts about every 20 years. So at the 15-year mark, we normally go in, we investigate, start planning what the future holds. Well, when we did our initial inspection in 2021, we found that the rafters of the larger tank were all bent sideways and about to fall into the tank. So we moved these up. So rather than doing them in 2024, we moved them up to this year. See, I got my notes. And so 2024, no, and so we'll do the initial, oh man, why are you smiling?
I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thanks, Scott.
Not 2024, I got that.
Right, so it's not 2024. So we're going to do them this year, and we're going to do the inspections in-house. We're going to have a third party inspect the paint, but all the structural stuff will be done in-house by Adam and Gary. I'll kind of oversee and kind of show them what they're supposed to be looking at and everything. And in order to make it a unique project, because it's by the park, we decided to do an educational theme around the edges. Any questions?
Is there any questions from council?
What size tank is that?
1.5 million gallons and a 0.5 million gallons.
Did we look at wrapping versus painting?
We did look at wrapping, and the wrap around it, we were worried about the paint, water getting between it, causing more rust problems.
Any other questions from council? If not, I'd entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the contract with NG Painting for the ground storage tank rehab CIP in the amount not to exceed $1,209,750 and authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary documents.
Second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Item 10, consider an act on the purchase of 4 generators through the buy board from Waukesha Pierce Industries, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $756,973 and authorizing city manager to execute the necessary documents. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, again, we have Glenn to lay out this item for you. And as an explanation, we've placed this on the regular agenda because we're using ARP funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, and that kind of makes that as a distinctive item.
So this one is 4 generators, 2 for both, 1 for each of the pump stations and 1 for each of the largest lift stations using ARP funding. Any questions on those?
Yeah, I've got a quick question. Are these, when do we foresee that these are going to be installed and operational?
So the vendor said they're about 8 months out. So
we just have to make it through this winter without a big freeze.
We actually have one rented on site already.
Very good.
I have a question. What is the power source? Is it diesel or is it natural gas?
It'll be diesel.
Okay.
So
thanks.
Yes.
Are there any other questions, council? If not, I'd entertain a motion on this item.
Mayor, I would move to approve the purchase of 4 generators via buy board from Waukesha Pierce Industries in an amount not to exceed $756,973 as approved in the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget using ARP funds and authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary documents.
And I'll second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Item number 11, consider an act on an ordinance adopting a new section of the Municipal Code of Corinth, creating Chapter 150.200 to include single-family rental programs. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'd like to have our Chief Building Official, Cleve Joyner, to lay out this item for you.
Mayor and Council, it's always a privilege and an honor. I'd like to start off by acknowledging 2 city employees that have helped tremendously with these ordinance provisions, and that would be Shelley McCain, who's here in the audience to answer any questions, and also GIS Manager Garrett Stryker. Without him, we wouldn't have the data that we have, and without her, we wouldn't have the assistance in putting this together. On September 16th last year, we brought 3 items to you to discuss. 2 of those items are here tonight. Briefly, the 3rd item, which was an animal control revision of the ordinance to protect dogs from being tied up without food or water and shelter And at that time, the governor had denied that particular part of the language in the law. It was resubmitted recently, and as of this week, it went into law. So all those provisions we were asking for are now state law. So you will not have to make a decision on that. But we were pleased with that result. So single-family rental ordinance. Let's see. There we go. Thank you. I will go over this briefly. What we're wanting to do with the ordinance is document and record any kind of the conditions of the property. Now, this is a benefit to the property owner and also to the person who's leasing the property, because we're establishing a baseline. Hot water works, electrical works, there's no broken windows, the doors work, so there's a baseline established. It also helps us document anything that needs to be taken care of, which is primarily a fire and life safety issue. In your packets, you have a checklist that we gave to you, and that's basically the checklist that we'll be providing to the tenant or the owner when we do the inspection. And that will also be online, so they will know that those are the things that we look for. And they're mostly fire and life safety, but there are some property management conditions that we're concerned with as well. We'll also be educating the homeowners and the tenants on here are our top items that we see that are in violations: tall grass and weeds, junk, and those kind of things, and so that we can educate the people as well. And then make sure we have safe sanitary provisions, promote the home's basically health and welfare of children, seniors, and then any dangers or hazards that may be in the structure, we'll be able to point those out and help maintain our aging community, because we do have some areas of Corinth that are aging and we're seeing them deteriorate and also transition into rental units. Next slide.
I have a quick question for you. When you say, how do you identify the homes that are rentals?
Good question. That's where Garrett came in. So we asked Garrett to go through each and every part of the DCAD database and identify where the owner of record was either addressed, not at that address, or addressed out of state. And so it's basically just eliminating tying in the owner with the mailing address of the owner. And so if that mailing address matched the house, then we didn't identify that. So again, this isn't an entirely accurate number, but it's as close as we could get. Now, if you recall, in September, I made a best guess on what the percentage was, but we've whittled that down, and the actual percentage of what we can identify as rental properties is about 12% citywide. And I think we have a number here that Garrett provided, and it's covered up by Kelly there, but it's about 779 residents that are rental properties that we've identified. Also, through that identification process, we were able to go by code violations, because as you know, if we have a code violation, we can only write the citation if we go that far, or give the letter of the citation to the property owner. So it's mailed out with a certified letter, and it's mailed out to the address of record with that property. And so through that, we were able to identify on another map that should be the next map, that all the properties, these in red, are code violations. One of the things that was really interesting in talking to Garrett yesterday when he was pulling the data, he was absolutely surprised at how many violations per rental property we have a history of. So that, in essence, is telling me that the data is showing that those rental properties are the ones that this program hopefully will bring those violations down. And a lot of it is that they just don't know the rules and regulations of the city. Now, what I can tell you is other cities that have this program have seen a significant drop in their code enforcement violations with those properties. So it's important to note. Next slide. Okay, this is just showing all the properties, those without violations and those with. And then we'll go to the last slide. And this is what I refer to as a soft opening. We wanted to make this as painless as possible. So we're saying if you agree and approve the ordinance, We're saying we want everybody to register with the city. Register your property that it's a rental property. That way we know who to call or who to send the letter to without having to spend the amount of staff time that we do to actually track it down, because we get a lot of return mail, and that costs the city money as well. So you register with the city, but you would not be required to have an inspection until you have a tenant change. So if somebody's already living in the house and there's no code violations that we've identified from our normal sweeps, then it's have a nice day until you make that change. And then they can also ask for that if they want one to, when they find out about the ordinance, they're going to want an inspection. They can certainly have that as well. At that point in time, that's when a fee would be applied, because that's when our staff time, so to speak, would kick in. Because part of the discussion we had in the workshop was what kind of work, additional work would that add to staff? And so we wanted to accommodate that, but we also realize, or are hoping, that like other programs, you see the code violations go down so that staff time kind of balances out. And then at that time, we have, in the ordinance we wrote in that once they ask for the inspection, we have 3 days to make that inspection. Part of that is because we don't want tenants waiting for an inspection. We don't want the landlord feeling like they can't have somebody occupy the property until we've made that inspection. So we didn't want any holdups. And there's also times where we may not have the staff to do it, and so it may not happen. Now we're talking, other things like COVID and different things that have impacted the ability to do our jobs. So those kind of things, that's why we built in the 3-day provision. And those you'll find that's very common in most cities that have that provision or have that inspection program. They'll have the 3-day limit. And then at that point, they're issued a certificate of occupancy, and then that's set the baseline that the property is safe and we can maintain it. Any questions?
If you find a violation in one of these rental homes, do they have to have a certified licensed plumber or licensed electrician to repair them, or can a homeowner actually do some of this correctional type work himself?
My understanding of state law is if you own a property but you're renting it out, it's not your home. And so you have to hire a licensed professional to do the work.
Okay.
Cleve, I have a question.
Sure.
How do you monitor when a home has a tenant change? Like, are we just relying on the honor system, and is there a consequence for failing to register?
The ordinance has some consequences, but to answer your question, the biggest trigger for us is at water billing. When the tenant comes in and they register to have the water put in their name, that's when we catch it. And we notify them at that point. We'd ask the question, they say, yes, it's a rental property, I have a lease. Then we would obviously say, okay, well, you realize we have an ordinance, here's the inspection that needs to take place. And first, notify your landlord and let them know that he needs to register with the city. That's a relatively painless registration because it'll be a fillable form online that they can fill and send to us automatically. So did I answer your question?
You did. Thank you.
Okay. I also want to point out, I'd be remiss if I didn't point this out. This is for long-term rentals. It's not for short-term. We still haven't got a handle on the Airbnb programs or people that have houses that rotate on a weekly basis or whatever the case may be. We're still working on that, and a lot of cities are struggling with that at this point in time. So this is for long-term rentals only.
What's your definition of long-term?
Be more than 6 months.
Okay.
So as a homeowner, if I have rental property, it's a requirement. This is not a choice, it's a requirement.
Required to register, yes.
Okay. And let's just say that I live in California and I have a management company that takes care of my properties for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
the management company would be notified that they'd have to accommodate the inspection.
What percentage of our homes, I know it's 779, what percentage of our homes is that?
It's right around 12%.
12%, okay.
I know I had mentioned earlier that I had kind of taken a guesstimate, and it was a little high, to be honest. So,
a quick question, sir. The $50 fee, how'd you guys come up with that? It seems a little low.
we looked at what other cities do and kind of balanced it between the two. City of Louisville, it's a free service. City of Carrollton, it's $75. Okay. And again, we wanted this to be a soft opening, so we thought, well, let's just go with $50. That seems fair as far as the amount of staff time it would take to go and do the inspection.
So a city employee will go do the inspection? I mean, because we don't have inspectors licensed. I mean, like for rentals and things like that, do we?
Well, it's in essence no different than a new home being inspected to occupy. It's the same inspection that the building department division does. We go in and check the electrical, we check the plumbing, make sure the toilet's flush, windows operate, smoke detectors work. So it's the same inspection. It's just an older home.
I have a question, Cleve, if I may. So how does the program get started? In other words, how are you going to notify homeowners now that have rental property that this is taking into effect?
Well, we have a list identified, and so there'll be a mailer that'll go out. And we haven't really nailed that down yet. We wanted to get approval from council before we spent the time creating the notifications. But it'd either be in a water billing or we'll just send them a letter directly letting them know of the ordinance change and how they can find it on the website, how they can register on the website, and then just go from there.
Will your inspections include things that are out of compliance? In other words, they're outdated?
We are only by law allowed to require something that is at the time the home was approved or CO'd. So if the home was built in 1990, there's been several code revisions since then. Some caveats to that. Smoke detectors, that's state law. So if their smoke detectors aren't compliant, they would have to be brought into compliance. But anything else would be just what was required at the time the home was built.
Thank you.
Cleve, I have one more. I'm sorry. I have one more question. Are they charged an additional $50 if they fail and it has to be re-inspected?
Currently, what we've decided is that we would just notify them if it's a life safety issue. It's going to be, let me back up, depending on the severity of the violation, would depend on how soon we'd want that taken care of. If the smoke detectors were not operable, then it would be, you have 24 to 48 hours to get these smoke detectors working, because that's a life safety issue. But if it's something that's a little bit different, that may take time to make that repair, we're going to give allowance for that. Now, if we get resistance, then we don't have anything built in as a reinspection fee, but our next step is to write a citation. So if we don't get compliance, then we'd send them a letter, just as we do with any other violation, and then let them know if they don't take care of it in a timely fashion, then they'll get a citation. But there are certain triggers and mechanisms and timeframes that we can work with. But there's no reinspection fee at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So what is in this for us, for the city? Just to take down our code violations or to make our city better, or?
Both. It's definitely to take down the code violations, but it's also because we're noticing, and in other communities, they've noticed as the communities start to age, they start to deteriorate because there's no program in place that says, hey, you need to take care of your property. An example is when prior employment, we started doing the program, and there were several houses that their high part of their chimneys had rotted. And actually one of them was my own home, but it wasn't a rental property. But sometimes you just don't look up and notice it. So, but it does when people drive through your neighborhood and they see deteriorating wood and different things. If it's not brought to their attention, then it's going to continue to go on and just get worse. So our hope is, and then again, going back to the violations, we have a significant amount of violations with the identified rental properties. If we can minimize those and clean up the properties, then the community looks better, property values are maintained, and it just kind of has a trickle-down effect. Just going off my experience.
So what cities around here do that, do this program?
The closest one is Louisville. They've been doing it for about 7 years now. It's a free service. They have, Last time I checked, I think they have about 4,800 single-family residentials that are identified. They were doing 3 a day 4 or 5 years ago. But that's a 200,000 population city. Carrollton is the next closest. They do one, theirs is $75 fee, and I couldn't tell you the numbers that they have, but I have heard in asking and calling that it has been a successful program. They've noticed a decrease in the violations and also an increase in how properties look. Denton has a program, but it's on you have to ask for it. They don't enforce anything. If you call and say you want an inspection, they'll do one, but they don't typically do one. There are other cities around. I believe Little Elm has a program as well. Flower Mound does not, and it's just, the type of. But what I can say about Flower Mound is, from what I've seen, is they have a lot larger areas that are covered by HOAs, and so they have a different regulatory portion. And this is, some of these communities that we're looking at don't have HOAs that you'll see the code violations in.
So would there be a way, I'm just not real comfortable with this, would there be a way to start it at the beginning where it would be a voluntary, I don't have any rental property, so I don't have a dog in this fight, but would it be a way to make it voluntary first and do that for 6 months or a year or whatever, and then make it an ordinance? Because it's almost Big Brother sounding to me, like we're trying to control people.
I've heard the arguments, and what I can tell you is that it can be whatever the council decides to do. If you want it to be a voluntary program, it can be. What I can tell you is that over time, people begin to realize, both the tenant and the landlord, that it's a benefit. And so after that, it's really pretty easy. But I will tell you from prior experience, 11 years ago, it was a bloodbath all over the state when these programs were popping up. But now everybody's, even the real estate community, is realizing that this is a benefit. The properties are kept up. There's certain criteria. The only thing that I would have any issue with, because of my background, is the life safety issue. You don't have working smoke detectors and you're afraid to say anything to your landlord, there's no protection for a tenant in the state of Texas. If they want to evict you, you're evicted. They don't have to have a reason. So that's a protective mechanism for their life safety, because I've had it happen where people are afraid to say anything and then they die because there's a fire in their apartment or their rental unit. And it was all because nobody bothered to check.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Cleve. I'd entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 22-01-20-01, adopting a new section of the Corinth Municipal Code, creating Chapter 150.200 to include the single-family rental program.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Cast your vote. It's 4-1. It passes. Okay, item number 12. Consider an act on the ordinance amending Chapter 118 of the Municipal Code of Corinth, specifying types and use of portable storage units, PSUs, and unattended outdoor temporary receptacles, UTOR. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'd like to have our Cleve Joyner, our Chief Building Official, to lay out this item for you.
It's been a while. So this particular ordinance is some cleanup and some additions. In regards to, let me see if I can move this forward. He said push the forward or back button. There we go. So what we've proposed on the residential side is that there were some provisions, but we wanted to kind of clean that up. And the main provision that we wanted to clean up was there was no clock. There was no time frame. So we have, I have to be careful what I say because I can't identify a product, but we have containers that people put their personal goods in, leave it on their driveway, and we have no ordinance that allows us to say, hey, it's been there more than 30 days, why is it here? We have tried in the past with, this is a accessory structure, it has to be in your backyard, and that's kind of, but we're just bluffing, and quite frankly. So now what we're asking is that we have an ordinance that specifically states that you have 30 days unless it's in relation to a building permit where you have a fire in your home or you have a flood like we experienced over the winter and you're having repairs done. Those are all associated with a building permit, or they should be. And then once they're associated with that building permit, then that's allowed to stay there by ordinance until the permit's finalized out, and then they have a certain time to move it. We also have times where they'll drop the container, not realizing that we can't have it in the street, but we're asking if you notify us, rather than us coming along saying you can't have it in the street, it's got to be up in your driveway, this is a violation, because you can't place those in the street because it interferes with traffic and those kind of things. Well, this ordinance requests that the company bringing them in, or the person that's moving in, or the owner, notify us that the container's being delivered. It wouldn't be permitted. It would just be notification so that we can make sure it's placed in the right location and not have to come back and tell people they have to move it, or that it can't be across the sidewalk and so on. So that's kind of the gist of that part of the ordinance. But there were no provisions on hard surface, can't be over the sidewalk, that kind of thing. The other one is the commercial side of it. We did have an ordinance that we currently have an ordinance, we're hoping to replace it, that specifically targets donation containers. There have been some court rulings that have required cities to allow these, that they can't disallow them, but cities can regulate the placement, the location, screening, and those kind of things. My experience, again, with these type of containers is it's an easy drop-off if somebody's moved out or been evicted for large furniture, which is what they're not intended for. And then the homeowner, or the property owner, is required to remove it, and they have to pay the expense of removing it. I've seen, actually have video of a lady who put her 2 children into the container. They threw all the clothes out. She sorted the clothes, stacked them on her car, put them in her car, pulled her children out of the container, drove off, and left everything laying on the ground. That was a common occurrence in a lot of cities. So what we're saying in this ordinance is it has to be on a platted lot, and if there's a multiple platted area like the Albertsons shopping center, there's only one for that entire shopping center. But wherever it's located, it's agreement with the property owner. It has to be behind the front building line, has to be screened, and the open end of the location of the container, the screening, can't face the front of the property. So this keeps it from looking like a blighted shopping center. And, quite frankly, we don't have a lot of these, but with the growth, they will come. And so we're just wanting to get ahead of the game on this one. We also, this is in regards to any type of container that's collecting. Another example would be recycle centers. There are grocery stores across the nation that designate the back parking lot of their store, and they put up bins, and they have people start bringing in recycled materials. Realize that we have a recycle program with our trash pickup, but it becomes a kind of an event, and people feel more, inclined to do that. But there's no way to screen these, and so this would also be an example of where we could get these devices or these containers screened in and kind of control them. The last part of that is that schools and churches would be exempt from the screening process, and they'd be allowed to have 2, because my experience again has been that schools and churches take care of their property, and they're not going to allow this kind of activity to happen on their properties. So we're just asking to kind of clean up this a little bit and not specifically target donation bins. Just call them unattended temporary outdoor receptacles. And that's to keep everybody out of trouble.
Is there any questions from council?
I have a question, if I may, on the residential. It just occurred to me, I did some remodeling on my house, and the container was there, I believe, 3 days. Is there a minimum number of days that you don't have to register?
No, it's just 30.
Day one.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question, council? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 22-01-20-02, amending Chapter 118 of the Corinth Municipal Code to include portable storage units and unattended outdoor temporary receptacles.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Consider an act on an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Corinth, Texas, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement between City Council and the Lake City Chamber of Commerce for the payment and use of hotel tax revenues. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'd like to have our Finance Director, Leanne Bunzelmeyer, to lay out this item. I'll also just note for the public that Councilwoman Tina Henderson has recused herself because of her employment with the Chamber, and as part of that recusal, has to leave the room in which the debate occurs.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Council. The item before you is to approve a contract with the Lake City's Chambers effective January 1 of 2022 through December 31st of 2022. The hotel occupancy tax is regulated by Local Government Tax Code Chapter 351, and it stipulates how we can use the funds, and it is a very restrictive use, and you have to use it for 7 statutory categories. As a recipient of these funds, the Lake City's Chamber will be required to adhere to those provisions within the Texas Local Government Code. And so this agreement before you tonight outlines the those items for the Chamber so that they know exactly the things that they need to do in order to comply with the Local Government Tax Code. And with that, I'll be happy to, one more thing. So the use of the money is for $5,000 for the bike rally. And I believe the bike rally is going to be held in September of 2022. They did hold the bike rally this last year in 2021, and they did show enough attendance from bringing in participants from outside the jurisdiction into the city that would comply with the provision of the tax code that says that you have to promote tourism and the hotel occupancy, the hotel industry. So with that, staff recommends approval of the agreement. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Okay. If not, I'd entertain a motion on this item.
Mayor, I would move to approve ordinance number 22-01-20-03, authorizing an agreement between the City of Corinth and Lake City's Chamber of Commerce for the payment of hotel tax revenue and authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary documents.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's a 4-0 vote with Councilwoman Tina Henderson abstaining. It passes.
I believe this is an item that we need no action. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We don't need any action tonight. We're operating under an automatic 6-month extension.
Okay, so we don't even have to go through it. Okay. Council comment and future agenda items. The purpose of this section is to allow each council member the opportunity to provide general updates and or comments to fellow council members, the public, and our staff on any issues or future events. Also, in accordance with Section 30.085 of the Code of Ordinances, at this time, any council member may direct that an item be added as a business item to any future agenda. Mr. Burke.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Garber.
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Holsworth.
Yes, Mayor, if I may. Mr. Hart, is there some way, I know we've had a conversation about this before, about all the trash and litter on on I-35. Is there some, I mean, it's almost embarrassing. Can we get the Keep Beautiful group together? And anyway.
Yeah, we've had, I'm going to have to do some more follow-up. We've had conversations with KCB. There's been some reluctance because of the speed of the traffic and so forth of getting volunteers. So that's what that's going to be the challenge on that. But we'll go back and follow up with them on that.
Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Mrs. Henderson.
Nothing, sir.
Mrs. Pickens.
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I wanted to remind you all about the joint City Council meeting on Wednesday with the hopefully all four of the lake cities. We'll be, the managers will be meeting tomorrow to kind of finalize the agenda and our ongoing saga here.
That's at 6 p.m.?
Yes, sir. 6 p.m. in the community room at the Public Safety Building. Yeah.
Anything else? I just want to congratulate the crime prevention from our chief over there. I understand that this month you're very much deserving of it in recognition of all the things you do for our citizens. So thank you so much for all you do. And again, with that, we're adjourned.